In the last episode of the Dead Calibers Archives, we discussed the history of multi-ball cartridges and touched on their developments from the 1800s to today. Yet, in that particular episode, there was one wildcat cartridge that I could have included, but it deserves its own more specialized video, as this particular multi-ball round was actually envisioned rather recently and created specifically to address the threats on the modern battlefield. Now, depending on who you ask, this particular threat has made tanks obsolete, the modern battlefield incredibly transparent, or it's just the poor man's guided missile. I'm Anders E.T. Herzberg, and on today's episode of the Dead Calibers Archives, we'll be discussing two very different responses to the drone threat. One, a borderline homemade wildcat cartridge, the other, a factory-made one with unique materials, paired with a shotgun made specifically for individual soldiers to be able to counter the drone threat. Stay tuned for today's episode. Of course, I can't do this for nothing, so the Dead Calibers Archives is sponsored by Cap and Ball Digital Strategies, a two-way focused digital marketing agency. Owned and operated by yours truly, we're here to bring advanced digital marketing strategies to the 2A community. When you've been in the trenches of digital marketing for as long as we have, you pick up some tricks. We've developed in-house solutions that pinpoint exactly where your customers are online, then deliver targeted messages that resonate. No fluff, no magic bullet, empty promises, just real-world results you can take to the bank. We do what no one else can do. We don't do cookie-cutter templates. Every campaign is tailored around your business's unique personality, target market, and inventory. Beyond the fancy, data-driven approach, we believe in old-school, genuine relationships. When you partner with us, you join the family. We know firearms are your passion, our right, and responsibility, one that we share, and we're committed to upholding the integrity of your brand while guiding you towards growth. The online space is crowded. We'll make sure your 2A focused service stands out from the rest. Whether you're a builder of the finest wireless hole punchers, a been there, done that trainer, or a plain simple gunsmith, learn more at capandballseo.com. So with that out of the way, back to the video. So what is this wildcat multi-ball that I mentioned in the opening? Well, if you have been following the Russo-Ukrainian war for some time, you've probably already heard something about these rounds already. To most of us, we might think the most effective response to a drone would be some kind of shotgun cartridge, and honestly that does appear to be the case from various testing that has been done. However, especially on the Russian side of the Russo-Ukrainian war, there just really isn't that much access to shotguns. So that's made coming up with some kind of an improvised solution for soldiers on both sides of the conflict much more of a necessity. I'm sure that if the combatants had their pick of various options, they would probably go with a shotgun. However, necessity being the mother of all inventions, we find both the Ukrainian and Russian soldiers making these particular wildcat rounds. Now, these improvised Buckshot rounds consist of a standard 5.45 cartridge having its normal bullet be removed, then replaced with a number of BB rounds, usually about size 6 from what we've seen, encased in some kind of either a heat shrink or other material, and then be loaded in place of where the standard bullet used to be. The first version of these wildcat rounds started appearing online and seemed to use a number of 4.5mm BBs in heat shrink tubing. The standard bullet from a 5.45 by 39mm case is removed and replaced with this improvised loading. Now, when it first appeared, there seemed to be very little standardization. Some loadings of this 5.45 Buckshot were using 4, others appear to be using as many as 7, perhaps. For all of these improvised Buckshot rifle rounds, they seem to be using the standard powder charge from the case itself, with no modifications either uploading or downloading the cartridge itself. Now, the first proper video evidence for these 5.45 Buckshot rounds first popped up in July of 2024. The video tutorial that was posted was basic, but it did start giving other units ideas, and the round continued to be iterated on. By November of 2024, even more videos were circulating, with not only improvised testing, but some tactics were starting to evolve around these rounds. Some videos and images appear to show that the heat shrink tubing was leaving behind plastic fouling in the barrel, and some soldiers were starting to use a mix of standard ball ammunition along with this improvised 5.45 Buckshot in order to clean up this fouling. However, it's not entirely clear how effective this really was. Beyond this, it's also entirely possible that some of these early versions of the 5.45 Buckshot rounds couldn't be used with the standard AK brakes. There's at least one video that has been floating around online showing a rifle firing these rounds, but having its standard brake be removed. However, the heat shrink version of the 5.45 Buckshot Wildcat really was just a first iteration on this, and both sides have continued to try and improve this particular idea. On the 23rd of February 2025, a video was released showing the 3D printing of sabots for these improvised 5.45 Buckshot rounds. These sabots would carry the BBs instead of using the heat shrink tubing, and this seems to be an attempt to address the problem of plastic fouling in the barrel. These particular sabots seem to be printed in a two-piece design, each with one half of a clamshell that could carry a number of BBs for this particular round. So far, versions with 4, 5, and sometimes more rounds have been noted. The sabot design also appears to have been iterated upon somewhat. Some of the early versions featured a more pointed nose, while others later on would be a little bit more rounded. Beyond this, it appears later versions of the sabot also use a chamfer at the base of it to facilitate loading of the completed sabot into the cartridge. However, it's not just the 5.45 by 39 that seems to be getting these particular sabot buckshot loadings. There's also been at least one image floating around online of 7.62 by 54R having been loaded with what appears to be the same kind of sabot design, just scaled up to incorporate 6, maybe 7 BBs instead. Only 3 rounds were visible in this particular image, and it's unclear if any more experimentation or testing has been done in the field with this particular version of the improvised sabot buckshot round. It remains to be seen if these particular loadings will be iterated upon further or attempted to be improved further, but it's likely that a more standardized and more effective solutions will continue to appear, as it's highly unlikely for the drone threat on the battlefield to disappear anytime soon. And of course, that leads us to our next topic, where we are already starting to see something of what a standardized anti-drone solution might look like: the angry tungsten cloud of the Norma AD-LER 12-gauge round. Now, here's the thing about drones. They're actually a lot harder to hit and bring down than you might actually think. First, there's the speed. Think about it. These guys are fast, and we're talking about a typical model running around the Ukrainian sky in excess of 70 miles per hour regularly and hitting 90 miles per hour in short bursts. Now, there's considerations to take into account for the drone operator when pushing to these kinds of speeds or pulling payloads, but the poor grunt on the ground really won't care much about those particular things when he's listening to the whine of those blades. I'm sure at that point, all he wants is the dang thing dead. Next, you have to consider the fact that these guys are actually really light. Even with a payload and in the air, a stupid amount of kinetic energy actually gets wasted when these things are hit because they don't put up all that much resistance to being moved in the air. Think about if you hang something off of a piece of string and shoot it. That's kind of what we're talking about here. It's not going to just sit there and let you punch a hole in it. It will want to move around in the air, and a drone getting hit with lead while in the air is going to do pretty much the exact same thing as a piece of steel on a string. Finally, we also need to consider that these drones are actually rather small targets, all things considered. When we're talking about 1, maybe 2 feet wide at most, and probably less than that in total height. Dirty Civilian actually has a rather good video where he takes a few shots at a drone attached to the ground, and you can see just how little damage a standard birdshot load does to a hobbyist level drone. Now, I'd be willing to bet most experienced duck hunters are probably going to have something of a challenge trying to hit a duck flying at 70 miles per hour consistently. Never mind the fact that it's going to be made out of materials that are just not going to be that easy to penetrate. In fact, if you want something of an idea for how difficult some of these materials can be to penetrate, Banana Ballistics actually has some rather extensive testing that you can take a look at using various standard materials and how they react to various standard loadings, anywhere from teeny tiny all the way up to slugs. So Norma and Benelli have tried to create something to give the poor ground pounders a way to deal with the drones in the sky. That's the AD-LER 12 gauge load. Now, this particular shot shell is intended to be paired with the Benelli M4 AI Drone Guardian. Say that 5 times fast. First, we'll go over the shotgun. The M4 AI is not all that different from a standard M4 shotgun. I would complain about AI being stuffed into the shotgun, but at least in this particular case, it stands for Advanced Impact, not Artificial Intelligence. Basically, it comes down to some modifications with the choke. According to Benelli's representative, it's a larger and longer choke than what it would normally be, with the rep stating that it was 10 centimeters long or just under 4 inches in freedom units. Now, this particular advanced impact technology is not new, however. It has been around for about 2 years at this point on Benelli's higher end shotgun lines. The whole point of the advanced impact system on their shotguns and hunting lines is intended to create better shot spreads and better terminal ballistics at distance. Something that we can agree is going to be important for a dedicated anti-drone shotgun. Now, beyond this, the M4 AI model is supposed to be paired with a dedicated red dot sight that has something of a unique reticle to it. Instead of having a standard single one-point dot, you have a circular reticle that's supposed to surround the drone when you're targeting it to make it easier to acquire. Now, moving on to the AD-LER shell itself. It's rather unique in its payload, and Norma apparently experimented with a number of different shot sizes, but ended up going with a number 6 size shot using a tungsten matrix. For the moment, I'm not entirely sure what the tungsten matrix composition is, as particular specifications for the AD-LER shell are few and far between at the moment. But if I had to guess, I'd bet they're using a shot that's not pure tungsten. If this is the case, I'd be willing to bet it's a cost-saving measure without sacrificing performance as an important factor. Since Benelli's representative did mention that while these shells are expensive, they are less expensive than some other anti-drone options out there on the market. Something that I think is a selling point that Benelli and Norma wish to emphasize with this particular shotgun and shot shell pairing. Now, for those who are unfamiliar, the choice of tungsten may seem a bit strange until you start actually looking at the history of the material. Back during World War II, it was noted that steel armor-penetrating ammo would actually shatter at high velocities and simply fail to penetrate thicker armor on tanks of the era. So the French, of all people, ended up coming up with some of the first tungsten cord anti-tank rounds. And tungsten has been in use as a armor-penetrating material ever since. However, small arms like rifles, shotguns really haven't seen the same kind of use for tungsten, as mild steel cores tend to be much more cost-effective and just as effective for penetrating body armor. Another interesting note with the AD-LER shell is a note that they were tuned for the shorter barrels, and they do seem to have a higher pressure as well. While I don't have exact specifications for their pressure, Norma does note that they are supposed to be only used in shotguns that have been rated for the Magnum 1320 bar proof pressure. In short, you really only want to be putting these rounds in shotguns that are intended to be handling Magnum, high brass, high power kind of loads. As part of the testing that I could find, Norma did run the AD-LER shells through a series of tests with Olympic trap shooter Aaron Heading in November of 2024. According to an article from calibredefense.co.uk, Heading took on 10 drones in total to help Norma test these shells and see what shot sizes would actually work best. Now, they came to the conclusion that a number 6 shot size was the best for a mix of effect on target and hit probability. Norma did also experiment with 4 and 8 shot sizes, the article notes. However, it seems 4 would be hitting harder but missing more often, and 8 would be hitting more often but not hitting nearly as hard. So a shell loaded with 350 individual BBs of number 6 shot size of this tungsten matrix material seems to be what Norma has gone with for the final version of the AD-LER shell. The last little trick that the AD-LER shell has is its wadding. It's much more cup-like, apparently, and holds on to the tungsten shot as it travels down the barrel at a rated 1329 feet per second. However, even with the finalized 6 shot size, the specialized wadding, and the somewhat speedy shot, most of the time it took around 3 shots to bring the drone down at ranges ranging from 33 to 65 yards. This isn't exactly amazing when you start to think about how quickly these drones are moving. At 70 miles per hour, you would have about 1 second at most to score a decisive hit on a one-way attract drone, less if the drone is going full tilt. Only time and further testing will prove out the effectiveness of the Norma AD-LER shell, and it remains to be seen if this is going to be the standard going forward, will need further revision, or if it will be supplanted by something completely different as an effective infantry-based anti-drone solution. However, in Norma's AD-LER shell, I think we have something of an idea of where further experimentation and ideas for hard kill anti-drone solutions that are infantry-based are going to be going in the near future. So, there we have it. 2 solutions to try and address the drone threat. The 5.45 Buckshot wildcat rounds almost remind me of something that should have come out of the SPEW program, though it might actually be more effective than just on paper if the video evidence is anything to go by. The Norma AD-LER is very much a straightforward attempt at taking an existing weapon system and making it much more specialized for a specific target with a purpose-built loading. Except this time, the birds lack feathers. If drones continue to be a presence on the battlefield, and I have little reason to think that they will be disappearing anytime soon, I'm sure we'll continue to see developments in small arms solutions for dealing with drones. Maybe mini AA guns are in the future. Now, hopefully you found this video interesting and informative. If so, please take the time to like, share with your friends, comment, for any questions, suggestions for future videos in the Dead Calibers archives, and subscribe for, hopefully, notifications the next time I upload. Actually, speaking of the SPEW program, next time we'll be discussing possibly the strangest ammo to have ever come out of that era, and it's one I'd be willing to bet you've never heard of before. So until next time, I'm Anders E.T. Herzberg for the Dead Calibers Archives, hoping to see you all again real soon. Now these rounds consist generally of a standard 5.45 cartridge having its bullet pulled and then being replaced with a number of brain. A video has been floating around showing 3D printed sabos. Sabos. Does it really matter? He's looking for the bullet, the one that don't stray. It's like thunder.